I'm Raymond MOWLA, and this is my story. Around the age of 10, decided to abandon Islam altogether because I felt like not only were there injustices in my home that made me feel like not continuing on to try to live up to God's expectations, but not only that, I wasn't feeling like I was adequately living up to my parents' expectations. And so I just kind of really rebelled against expectations altogether and turned away from my faith, and that's when I started to pursue a life of crime. Early teenage years, that's when I started to get into fights at school, and this was usually the outbursts of when I was intoxicated. These outbursts, I feel like they were just like an expression of the inner turmoil that was going on in my own heart. I struggled a lot with the things that I saw going on in my home. To see my mom get abused, it affected me in a very confusing way because the perpetrator was my father, someone who I love, and I didn't want to harm him. Sure enough, my dad came home and he was kind of in a drunken rage and angry about things that were going on in their marriage. My mom called me and I ran home and I just went up to the door and I kicked open the door, and me and my brother just started beating on my dad, and my mom was calling the police. It was just this whole mess of a situation. The police ended up coming. They saw that my mom was struck and that she had bruises, and so they arrested my father. I did what I thought in my power was the right thing to do, and I quickly saw that that wasn't right at all, and that continued to perpetuate my alcoholism and me running to try to shut off those condemning voices I felt in my conscience that were like just reminding me that now I'm the reason for their breakup, I'm the reason for their separation. I was continuing to act on that anger, to lash out at people in bars and the nightclubs. And one night I was out with my sister, and a guy came and he approached my sister and was trying to pick her up. An escalation of events between not just only her, but one of her friends, who the gentleman was also trying to make advances on. And the evening ended with me stabbing that gentleman 9 times in the chest. It was pronounced second-degree murder on the scene because the guy had died on the scene. They took him and placed him in a drug-induced coma to keep him alive. And at that time, they had arrested us. We were in custody. And about 48 hours after, he had woken up from this drug-induced coma, which caused them to drop the charges to aggravated assault, which is the only reason why I'm even sitting here. Otherwise, I'd probably be serving a life sentence. I ended up getting 2 years plus a day, which is the absolute minimum for a federal sentence. It was during this time that when I hit this low, considering that I could have taken this person's life. But I had these 2 cousins who were Christian. They had converted from Hinduism, and they came to visit me, and they had a powerful experience with the Holy Spirit, and they were just saying these things that just sound too good to be true, but they were the things I was hoping for. They were talking about freedom. They were talking about power to change. When I was approaching being released, I had taken a lot of encouragement from the Bible and these biblical teachings that helped me to get through that season of my life. But when I came out of prison, I started to think that, well, there's nothing that the church necessarily I need from them in order to be able to do that. I can do this on my own. Now I think I can see life a little bit more clearly, and I can just choose the right thing. And so I tried that, and it took me about 5 years, just slowly going right back into the same pit that I was in before I was incarcerated, right back to that drunken stupor, right back into that place where I was making poor choices, getting into fights again, and finding that I was no more free 5 years after I had been released from prison than I was the day I got out. I started to realize that there's a different kind of freedom that I needed, and that actually 5 years later drew me back to attend that church. It was 2 a.m. I had just been smoking up with some friends of mine on my way home from church. A police car pulled up behind me. I didn't have even a license at the time. It had gotten suspended again for drinking and driving. I was supposed to have a breathalyzer in my car, which I didn't have. I didn't have valid insurance on the car. I had made a false slip that I was driving with. There was alcohol in the vehicle. There was marijuana. There was so many things wrong with this situation that had that cop just simply turned on his lights and pulled me over, I was going back to prison. I heard this voice speak to me, and he said, They could come as close as they want to you, but unless I give the word, they cannot touch you. The cop who is right in pulling me over and arresting me and in doing his job, the Lord is telling me he's going to protect me from the cop. That doesn't even make sense to me. When I pulled off from those lights when it turned green, the cop in the middle of the intersection just all of a sudden randomly decided to turn right and start going off in the adjacent direction. And when that happened, I was like, did I really hear that voice? Like, is this really happening? I doubted. I drove to the next intersection. I told myself that didn't happen. And sure enough, another cop from a different plaza or something pulled out and came behind me. I heard it again. He said they can come as close as they want to you, but unless I give the word, they cannot touch you. And I so wanted to believe it. And I pulled off from the lights, and as I was pulling off, just trusting, hoping that maybe he's gonna protect me again, all of a sudden the police sirens went off. So when I saw those lights, I was so let down once again. And all of a sudden, that same cop who had turned on his lights, who's behind me, and there's no one else on the road 2 a.m. in the morning, he drives around me and takes off. I guess he got a completely different call. Instead of the judgment and the punishment that I knew I deserved, that I thought I'd be receiving, instead there was this grace about the whole situation. I say grace now, but I didn't even know that word back then. It was something gentle about his voice. He began leading me, and even through the announcer, the lady on the radio finally cued me, and when she said something that I knew was for me, she said, get up, today we're gonna teach you how to walk. And that kind of begun me on this journey. From day to day, like that continued on, that God would be leading me step by step. And I realized that this is the very thing that I was lacking, the very thing that I had been searching for. If God had created us, why did he just create us and leave us here? And the answer is that he hasn't. He created us for a relationship. And every single day of the last 6 years, I've experienced relationship, living every day of my life with God. And day by day, he continues to cultivate my life. He showed me so many things that have helped me to overcome the difficulties of alcoholism and drugs and even a pornography addiction that I had. And he continues to help me in when I fail. But above all, he showed me the significance of why Jesus died on the cross, and that I was only experiencing this relationship because of what his son had done. And that just blew me away completely. For the first time, I understood what the gospel was all about.